war has pushed prices up. They could go as high as $200 a barrel, some analysts think. How long is it fair to expect American drivers and drivers around the world to pay that premium for this war?
As long as it takes. So Russia cannot, in fact, defeat Ukraine and move beyond Ukraine.
They say that this could be a long war measured in years, and I think everybody understands why this is happening, but is it sustainable? What do you say to those families who say, listen, we can't afford to pay $4.85 a gallon for months, if not years. This is just not sustainable.
Well, what you heard from the president today was a clear articulation of the stakes. This is about the future of the liberal world order, and we have to stand.
I will admit, when the war that started between Russia and Ukraine, and I hate to use the word war because even Russia doesn't consider it a war. Russia's been saying that it's a special operation because they don't consider it a war, in that a war is usually a battle between evenly matched opponents, and Ukraine is absolutely no match for Russia at all. When this first started, I remember hearing in our news media here, which is basically pro-Ukrainian propaganda, that Russia had lost like 5,000 troops within like the first 2 or 3 days. Now, I never believed that. However, it was being reported here. It was propaganda, and it was obvious because if any country lost that many troops in that short a period of time, there would definitely be an obvious escalation, possibly even including nuclear war. But obviously that never happened. However, again, it was being reported by our media. Then you also remember there was the fake reports behind the ghost of Kyiv. They were talking about how one Ukrainian fighter pilot shot down all of these Russian fighters. I was like, wait a minute, that doesn't even make sense from a purely technological point of view, considering how many rockets and how many missiles and how many bullets a fighter can carry, how much fuel a fighter has. It just didn't make sense. But sure enough, it was exposed a little bit later as a lie. I had, as I mentioned before in a different video, one liberal asshole with his head up his ass decided that he was going to loudly announce to me that he was taking me off his friends list because he was saying that I was spreading pro-Russian propaganda. Apparently, people can't take the objective truth as anything but propaganda. But sure enough, 6 months later, I'm guessing he's being forced to recognize the truth of what MSNBC, CNN, and Fox News weren't telling him. From the moment this war started, I knew that the Russians were going to win it. It was obvious because they have professional troops, they have more weapons, they have more time, they have more advanced technology, they have more advanced weapons, they have more land, they have more population, they have a government that is stable. Originally, I used to say I thought Russia was going to flatten the Ukraine. And then I realized they're not really trying to flatten the Ukraine because if they were, they would have done it already. And I think that was the biggest mistake because our media doesn't think. They're a bunch of talking heads. They're idiots on The View. They're idiots on MSNBC. They're idiots on CNN. They're idiots on Fox News. These people don't think. And it occurred to me, maybe a couple of months in, that it was like, wait a minute, Russia's not trying to flatten Ukraine. There are Russian-speaking people there that they want to protect and they don't want to kill. So they're not just going to flatten this place. They're not just going to bombard it willy-nilly. They're just not going to blow the whole place up. And then it started to occur to me that what Russia was doing was that they were taking their sweet time and putting America, the West, Europe into a protracted war. Now, if you've never heard this term before, I'm going to explain what it means. But basically, American culture teaches us that we should have an enemy-centric view of war. Destroy the enemy as quickly as possible. Destroy the enemy's ability or will to fight. That's why we build stealth fighters and we have stealth bombers and whatnot, because what we want to do is we want to make the enemy think that he can't win, and that will make him basically give up. But there are other ways of conducting a war. You can be terrain-centric, you can take over key objectives, or you can be population-centric. You can go after a population, control them, and then everything else will follow, because obviously the military draws out of the population. But when I really thought about myself as a chess player, or when I thought about myself, how I used to play strategy war games like Command and Conquer, sometimes what I would do is instead of going for the quick kill, what I would do is I would take my sweet time. And when my enemy knew that he was beaten, sometimes I would push up my pawns on him and make it so that there was nothing he could do except watch me get four queens. And eventually he'd have to tip his king. But I would do it basically as an insult to his intelligence. And I would do it because I wanted to see how much time it would take him before he'd tip his king over. A protracted war is basically when you spend a lot of time, more than you need to spend fighting the enemy. Why would Russia waste time fighting Ukraine? Well, it makes perfect sense when you see that America is sending them weapons, Europe sending them weapons. Eventually, by making them take more time fighting, what you're doing is you're wearing down their resources and you're wearing down the resources of the enemy who's mailing them weapons, if you want to use a word. So what they've been doing is they've been slowly whittling down the Ukraine. They know that they can't be invaded by the United States of America, which is basically the only enemy that Russia worries about. After World War II, and you see the movies about how Germany attempted to invade Russia, you understand why Russia can't be invaded. But they know America can't invade them. They know America can't use nuclear weapons on them as long as they don't use nuclear weapons themselves. And they also know that there's no risk from China, who's the next largest military right nearby. They know that they are basically working with China. China's buying a lot of their energy products. China doesn't use as much gasoline, but they use a lot of oil and they use a lot of, coal. So the reality is Brazil, Russia, India, China, South Africa, they call it BRICS. These countries are working together to create their own global superpower. And right now, what Russia's doing is they're whittling down America's ability to wage war there, because this is basically a proxy war. And America is sending weapons to Ukraine. Ukraine's using those weapons on Russians. But the Russian population backs the war for the most part. Their government is stable. They were trying to say Putin was dying and that he's being overthrown by his own people. None of that ever happened. He's still alive. And when you really understand what's happening here, we're basically in a protracted war. This is not a typical war where we can just go and blow them up and blow up their air defenses and then occupy them like we did Iraq. That's not what this is. This is a long-term protracted war. And the sad thing is, America is not smart enough to simply stop. As you may know, Boris Johnson resigned earlier today. Boris Johnson resigned earlier today, and a number of other people also stepped down and resigned as well. Now, this story right here is older than what happened this morning, but the point is Boris Johnson stepped down. One of the issues with the protracted war is that your enemies end up having to pay political losses simply because if you look at what's going on, America and Europe imposed sanctions against Russian energy and basically, without due process, they started seizing their assets and they basically caused Russia to default on paying back its loans. But the issue ultimately is that the economy got so bad for Russia's enemies, I should say, America. The economy got really bad. Gasoline prices are through the roof. They're starting to come down, but only because we suspended the gas tax and we started using the Strategic Petroleum Reserve. So without having done that, gas prices would probably be about 30 to 40% more than they are right now. Now, these political pressures have just taken down Boris Johnson. So let's think about that for a second. The only way Boris Johnson even got into office was because he ran as, quote unquote, the British Trump. They called him a Brexit in and of himself. And basically, while the West thought that it was unlikely that the British would ever vote for somebody like that, we ended up getting our own Trump because the American people were sick and tired of the political and the economic conditions of that time. And then the British themselves were sick and tired of the political and economic conditions at that time as well. So they voted for this guy. I'm pretty sure Boris Johnson never expected that the American sanctions that were put on Russia would cause such an economic backlash that it would cause him to have to resign and those other people to have to resign. And the way I see it is Boris Johnson may only be the first. These other European countries, some of them may face such a bad political climate that they themselves may end up having to resign. And I'd also like to point out a theory that I have, and I can't prove it because obviously, I'm not over there. I can't prove it. I actually believe that the current lockdown that China has with COVID-19, I think that this lockdown doesn't actually need to happen. I think China's doing this in order to cause more economic pressure on America. Because as you know, America had put forth tariffs on China. That was pretty much what I've said cost Trump his presidency. I said it back then. If Trump had never fucked with China, if Trump had never backed that quote unquote, that foreign stock exchange accountability nonsense where we were trying to tighten the screws on China, if Trump had left China alone, I think he'd still be president right now. But the second he fucked with China, it was over. And I knew it from the moment he started messing with China. If you really think back, everything was going great for Trump. The economy was doing great. In 2019, during 2019, I had traveled. I think I went to Philippines and I think I went to South Korea, or maybe that was 2018. Before, I know I spent the summer in the Philippines. Oh yeah, and right before that I went to Thailand. The economy was going great for Trump. And sure enough, around the end of 2019, that's when I started to hear about a SARS-like illness in China. And by March 2020, we started the quarantine and we shut down basically everything. And I always will believe that the reason why this happened was because Trump decided to screw with China. And right after that, it was all history from that point on. I personally believe that these current COVID lockdowns in China are their way of basically waging an economic warfare against America. Because you think about it, if they shut down their production, right, that means that there's a lot of products that we don't have access to because there's supply shortages. So if there's supply shortages, what does that do? That causes angst and unease and political pressure on the Biden administration and obviously Kamala Harris and the Democrats, not the Republicans. It's causing that pressure specifically on the Democrats because they're the ones who are pretty much in power. So I can't prove it, but that's my theory. I think that this is all a big game of chess right now. And I think Russia and China are playing this game better than America is. Boris Johnson, he resigned. So he's done. And they're looking for the next prime minister, but they're looking for someone who can actually lead and be a good prime minister for a long period of time. They're not looking for a quick replacement. The Democrats, come November, that's just a couple of months away. They're going to get wiped out. Now, some Democrats will be able to control their seat and be able to hold on to it based on them running against the Supreme Court, canceling Roe versus Wade, making it so it went back to the states. Roe versus Wade, I don't believe is enough of a platform to make sure that you keep your seat. Now, people like Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, yeah, her seat she should be okay. She's in New York. Somebody like Governor Hochul, which as much as it disgusts me to have to say this, chances are she's going to be the next governor in New York. And it's not something that I want to see, but yeah, chances are that's what's going to happen. I would like to see Zeldin defeat her, but I just don't think that's going to happen because, unfortunately, if you understand New York politics, New York City basically controls the entire state. Now, there are some Republicans like Andrew Wilkow who talk about the fact the Constitution promises us a Republican form of government within the states. The problem is it doesn't go far enough. It doesn't say that we have to have an electoral college. It just says that we have to have a Republican form of government, i.e., we elect leaders to represent us and they go to Congress or they go to whatever. But the point is, in California and New York, there's a growing number of dissatisfied people who want more of a say in these elections with an electoral college, but they don't have it, and their states are basically controlled by the urban centers such as New York City. In my case, it's New York State, New York City. New York City alone controls basically all of New York State. There are a number of Democrats elsewhere in New York State, but the simple fact is New York City overwhelms everybody else's vote. So, when you had Trump come from New York, he couldn't even win New York State. Despite the fact he won 2016, he couldn't win New York State, and that was his own state. And that really says something bad about you if you can't even win the own state that you came from. But it also tells a bigger story when you look at the fact that you did win, and you did win an electoral college victory across all the other states. So some people might say, oh, well, that says that you're a bad person and your state knew you well while the rest of them didn't. But it also could say that people were so sick and tired of the politics as they are that they were willing to vote for somebody who was different. And they were completely disgusted by somebody like Hillary Clinton, who also came from New York State. So Boris Johnson resigned. I believe that there will be other resignations because Europe, I said this already because of the fact that that I've been long in gas and oil companies when it comes to stock purchases. Europe is going to freeze its ass off this winter. And winter is coming, just like Game of Thrones said. Winter's coming. And Europe, I don't think they're going to be okay come winter. I think they're going to freeze their asses off. Russia was supplying cheap energy to America, that we were getting 600,000 barrels of oil a day from Russia. Europe was getting cheap energy from Russia. Now, Russia is still afloat because a lot of their oil and gas and coal is getting purchased by China, India, and other countries in Southeast Asia and whatnot. And the thing about it is, I don't think American production is going to be able to feed Europe what they need to make sure that they don't freeze their asses off this winter. And that's just what I believe. Now, that's in the near future, but the reality is energy is the ability to do work. That's like the basic that's what energy basically is. It's the ability to do work. If you take a good look around, all of our infrastructure is hurting right now because energy costs are so high. When gas prices go up, food prices go up. When diesel prices go up, everything goes up because you get everything shipped, whatever it is, food to your store, products from Amazon, whatever it is. Uber drivers can't afford to drive their cars because gas is so high. Uber drivers being forced to change their vehicles because they can't afford it. There are, I would say, about 30 to 50 million Americans who are at risk. As you know, layoffs are coming. As you know, unemployment is preparing to rise, which is why the stock market, the crypto markets have taken such a big hit. The way I see it, the longer this protracted war goes on with Russia, and the longer energy prices remain where they are, we've got a lot of suffering coming. Now, I've been saying for a little while that I think that the Russians slowed things down on purpose, and now I'm starting to see the term that's the new word for today, protracted conflict or protracted war. And basically what a protracted war is it's a siege that lasts longer than expected simply because one of the enemies is being more methodical and he's causing the other enemy to waste his resources, waste his time, et cetera, et cetera. Like, for example, if you play chess and you play with a clock, and that's the only way I play, if you play with a clock, your enemy can take most of your pieces and he can be way ahead of you and he can still lose simply because he ran out of time. Now, in the real world, the way that would look is, America has elections coming. We've got elections coming in November, and we've got Biden and Harris. The end of Biden's term comes in 2024. He has a clock. Vladimir Putin, as far as I know, has no clock. Vladimir Putin is going to be, dictator, leader, whatever you want to call it, and that's just it. Biden has a clock. The Democrat Congress, the Democrat House and Senate have a clock. Their clock runs out in November. And considering how badly this economy is going, I don't expect any of them to be there. I think there's going to definitely be a red wave. So if you're a Wall Street Journal article reader, you can read, they say Russia's tactical shift in Ukraine raises prospect of protracted war. 3 days ago, Ukraine invasion turning into protracted war that Russia will win, experts warn. And by the way, I came up with my ideas myself. If you watch my videos, you know that I've been saying this stuff all on my own. But even now, the experts are trying to tell them, yeah, this looks like that's what this is, a protracted war. Does a protracted conflict favor Russia or Ukraine? Well, I think it's obvious that it favors Russia. The reality is, as Russia continues to pound Ukraine, Ukraine continues to lose soldiers. Ukraine continues to have to beg for more money and more weapons. More money and more weapons that aren't coming. I mean, obviously, even Al Jazeera says U.S. warns of protracted war as Russia shifts aim in Ukraine. Even Al Jazeera is saying it. Ukraine says Russia trying to move war into protracted phase. Okay, so now they're really using the word, obviously. That's the word for today, protracted war. Ukraine invasion turning into protracted war that Russia will win, experts warn. And this is by Kate Buck. That's some name, Kate Buck. Kate Buck. Okay, so the war in Ukraine risks turning into a protracted conflict that Russia will eventually win. A leading think tank has said. This report by the Royal United Services Institute warned that current Russian advantages and Ukrainian weaknesses are leading to a style of conflict that favors Moscow. The invasion is developing into a war of attrition, where each side attempts to break down the other through continuous and ongoing losses of personnel, troops, and equipment. After failing to take the capital of Kyiv, Russia's forces have concentrated their attack on the southeastern Donbass region and have managed to gain control of a number of cities in Luhansk and Donetsk. The city of Lysychansk was claimed by Russian forces on Sunday, bringing an end to one of the biggest battles in Europe for generations, which saw Moscow bring the full might of its ground forces to a small area of the front line. During a brief televised meeting with his defense minister, Putin congratulated Russian forces on their victories in Luhansk. The capture of the city means that Russia has essentially gained control of the entire Luhansk region, marking Russia's biggest victory since it captured the southern port of Mariupol in late May. Ukraine's military intelligence chief Budnov said his defense forces have withdrawn to advantageous positions in order to gain tactical superiority after the Russians razed the city to the ground. Damn. Nina Bondar, who was evacuated from Lysychansk, said, "The city doesn't exist anymore. It has practically been wiped off the face of the earth. There is no humanitarian aid distribution center. It has been hit." The Rusi report said While Ukraine does have the will to achieve the operational defeat of the Russian military, there are a number of factors that mean a longer war can eventually lead to Russian victory. These include Russian attacks preventing Ukraine the chance to destroy their artillery, Russian forces attacking Ukraine defense forces and preventing them from launching offensive attacks, repeated cruise missile attacks on Ukrainian cities, bringing a high economic and political cost. Ukraine currently does not have enough trained soldiers and armored operators, limiting their ability to conduct offensive operations. So, by the way, when I showed a map like this, that's when that jerk off on my friends list on Facebook, that's when he decided that he was going to unfriend me, because I showed him a map just like I'm showing you now, and he called it Russian propaganda. Now, mind you, this is coming from fucking Yahoo News. So if you want to tell me that this is Russian propaganda, okay, fine. Whatever. I can't stop you. But from what it looks like, the Russians are kicking ass. And this is specifically exactly what Putin said that he was going to do. He said that he was going to go into this Donbass region and that all of the Russian speakers, he was going to protect them from what he claimed were Nazis. And that's what he did, what he said he was going to do. That's what he did it. I mean, he's doing it. The report added, Ukraine's allies have an essential role in achieving victory for Ukraine. Ukrainian victory is possible, but only with international support. In the absence of that support, Ukraine may either be worn down through attrition and economically strangled, or else fight a protracted and bloody war over several years. We're already in month number 6, by the way. Many countries have been offering military aid to the embattled nations, something Russia said was hugely consequential in enabling Ukraine to survive. However, the authors warned against Ukraine's allies continuing with the piecemeal delivery of different fleets of equipment, each with separate training, maintenance, and logistical needs. According to Russia, assistance with Ukraine needs urgently includes anti-radiation seekers for loitering munitions to suppress or destroy Russian weapons, multiple launch rocket system to destroy Russian logistics and ammunition stockpiles, secure communication systems, anti-tank guided weapons, and man-portable air defense systems, protected mobility to enable Ukrainian troops to maneuver under fire. So they got a couple of pictures here. Ukrainian President Zelensky has vowed to carry on with the resistance following the loss of Lysychansk and Mariupol. Let's not forget about that. In an address, he said, we will rebuild the walls, we will win back the land, and people must be protected against all else, above all else. And if the commanders of our army recall people from certain points of the front where the enemy has the greatest fire advantage in particular, this also applies to Lysychansk. It means only one thing, that we will return thanks to our tactics, thanks to the increase in the supply of modern weapons. So there's a video that basically shows Biden being questioned by the White House, at the White House garden. And somebody asked, how long should the American people have to endure the suffering that we're going through based on this conflict? And Biden basically says, you're just going to have to deal with it. Basically, that's not his exact words. I'll be perfectly honest. But I could pull up the clip and I could probably play it. I hope it wouldn't get copyright flagged. But then again, these days, I don't know. I'll say it like this. The smartest thing that Ukraine could do at this point is to surrender. The longer this goes on, the more the Russians will destroy. Russia is basically dead set on doing exactly what they're doing. The more you fight them, the more they will destroy of that place. It's obvious that Ukraine in no way can handle the Russian onslaught. Just when you look at these photos, it's obvious that they can't handle it. Now, it's funny, the stuff that they were asking for about communications equipment, Ukraine already has very advanced communications equipment. The problem is that as soon as you start to use that stuff, the Russians know exactly where you are because you have such a strong signal that as soon as you turn this shit on, they know where you are. So they could just start using artillery and bombing the shit out of you. Furthermore, artillery, as some of these soldiers are basically saying. It's the worst way you could be bombed. It's different than being bombed by a plane because, see, when a plane comes, you know the plane is coming and you know the plane is about to drop the bomb, and you can basically see the plane and you can see the path the plane is flying, and you can basically guess where he's going to drop the bomb. Artillery is some shit you have no idea where that shit's coming from. When they fire those shells and those things go up into the sky, you have no idea where they're coming down. The bombing is just incessant. It can last for long periods of time. And with artillery, you can fire from behind your lines, and the enemy has no way of getting behind your lines because you're firing it's like you're firing these shells over miles and miles and miles, and these things are just coming down randomly and hitting. You don't know what they're shooting at. So my thing is, it's like, for this to have gone on for 6 months is ridiculous. But it's obvious that the Russians are making this a protracted war because they're trying to wear down the West. I don't know what these think tanks are saying to the White House, but if these people were smart, which they are not, I already know they're not. If these people were smart, they would stop sending Ukraine weapons and they would tell Ukraine to surrender. And from what I'm hearing, they are discussing that, but I don't think they're doing it fast enough. Because, again, for this to have gone on for this long, yeah, Putin is flattening the Ukraine. The thing about it is he's doing it real slow. And the slower he does it, the more Ukrainians will die, the more innocent Ukrainians will die, the more innocent Ukrainian people will suffer. My thing is, you've lost. It's better. You know what's funny? I think to Lockheed Martin and the stock, one of the reasons why I bought Lockheed Martin stock was really because I believed in the F-22 project. Then I realized that these stealth fighters are a huge waste of money. I realized that for you to have a jet that you fly that shit for like 1 hour and it takes like $20,000 or $30,000 to maintain it, that's a huge waste of money. Stealth fighters, their skin is very, very sophisticated. It's very sensitive. It's like those things are really expensive. Those are not just jets. You're not just buying jets. You're buying programs. These are weapon programs. I'm not just trying to sell you a jet. I'm trying to sell you a jet, the extended warranty. I'm trying to sell you the extended weapons warranty. I will give you more weapons over a very long period of time. I'm trying, you need new wheels on that? Yeah, well, we're the only people who can give you wheels for that F-35. Okay, I need you to come back to me for the wheel. Basically, selling somebody an F-35 is like selling them a Bugatti. It's like all of the repairs are going to cost you a shitload of money, and you can only come to me to get them. All those repairs, you got to come to me. And that's what I realized. Like, wait a minute. No wonder why Lockheed Grumman and Raytheon, no wonder why these people are making all these stock gains. It's because they're selling fucking weapon systems. They're selling programs. The F-22 we can't export, but the F-35, man, that thing, as bad as it sounds like it was doing based upon what what the reports you heard said, the simple fact is Europe is scared shitless at this point, and they are ready to sign on the dotted line. So basically, that's a stock tip. If you haven't already bought Lockheed Martin, you probably should. They also pay a dividend, by the way, because I give stock tips where I can. And Raytheon, too. And I've been telling you this for a long time. Buy Boeing. Boeing is low. It's on sale right now. So back to the story. Basically, this is a protracted war. I don't know what these think tanks are telling these people in charge, but if I were them, I'd be telling them, listen, it's time to start surrendering. And I know that what we're dealing with is we're dealing with neocons and we're dealing with these stupid liberals who think that they can win. But this is a proxy war that they can't win. And this is the type of fighting that Russia's really good at. For those of you who don't know World War II, Hitler found out the hard way. He tried to invade Russia. Russia wore his whole fort, wore him down, and then basically walked into Berlin, walked in there, and took the whole place over. But I just don't know if our leaders are smart enough to understand what's going on here. And even if they do understand it, the question is, do they lack the arrogance that would make them believe that they can just keep this up and that they can win in the end? Because the problem is, it's one thing to understand that your enemy is basically superior in this position. It's another thing for you to say, you know what, I'm just going to stop and I'm going to back away. I don't think that these people right now, I don't think that they have the, what's a good word? I don't think that the intelligence is one word. I don't think that they have the wisdom to back down. And at this point, I think it's obvious that that's exactly what they should do.